Hi, I'm Devin from Careerified. Welcome back to Talking Careers with Young Adults. My aim with this series is to give parents and guardians a little bit wider of a context to use when talking to their young adult kids about their next steps in career and education planning. So far, we've talked a little bit about the basics of career development, what that involves. And we've also touched on the mindset that you bring to the conversation and the language that you use in the conversation and how that might affect the effectiveness of these conversations. If you haven't watched those videos yet, I highly recommend you go back and do that. Um, and if you have and you're ready to go, we're going to dive into chapter 3. So I'm just going to minimize my video so you can focus on the slide content and we will get going. So as I mentioned, we have already covered the basics of career development as well as mindset and language and what to be aware of there. Today, we're going to do a little bit of a primer on post-secondary pathways. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the most, I guess, the best known pathways. I do want you to bear in mind that this is a bit of a primer. So I encourage you to take this as a jumping off point to explore some of these options in more detail. There are some pathways I won't be talking about at all. I am mainly going to stick to the best known 3, just to open the door a little wider from university as the be all and end all. As I've done with previous videos, I want to pose a few reflection questions for you. So first, what was your own pathway out of high school? Second, what would you change about that if you could? And then I want you to take a moment and switch places with your child. Just in your mind, just think about how you might feel if you were in their shoes. And then likewise, I want you to switch places with your own parent or guardian. And how might you feel in their shoes at this point in their life? Especially when you think about education, what their wants for you were at the time, and how things have turned out to this point so far. Okay, so put all that in context. As I suggested with previous videos, if it's helpful for you to jot down some of these reflections, go for it. If you are ready to head on into the next steps, then we will start with an introduction to the 3 best known options out of the out of the secondary school graduation. And those are apprenticeship, college, and university. The apprenticeship pathway is the route to all of the skilled trades. In Canada, that equates to over 200 different careers. Generally, it will change depending on the particular trade that you choose, but generally speaking, about 80% of the training is completed in the workplace and 20% is completed in school. While the student is at work, they work under a master tradesperson in that area and are tested on various competencies in the workplace as they go through. And then the training portion is completed at a college, a union, a training center. There are a number of different organizations that get involved in that piece. And this is administered at the provincial or territorial level within the country. Most apprenticeships fall into the 1 to 4 years area. Some actually are closer to 5 years. So that's something you can check out as you get started. And of course, if you decide to become qualified in more than one trade, you have to complete the extra training as well. At first glance, the college and university pathways don't actually look that different. Both will prepare graduates for a variety of careers in business, the arts, technology, healthcare, community services, you name it. You will find, at least on the college side, that there are more privately funded institutions where certainly in Canada, most universities are publicly funded. There's also an array of different credentials. So the big differences really come down to how the learning is delivered. So in colleges, the programs tend to be more compact. They are very much more specific to a particular industry, a particular field, and of course the career within that field. And many of the students will be taught by industry professionals. So a lot of the instructors and faculty actually are not full-time teachers, they're part-time teachers, and they work full-time in whatever industry they teach in. In the university side, there's much more of an emphasis on a wider range in terms of education. So students are typically more expected to complete electives. They're expected to have a bit more of a well-rounded education as they come out, and their professors, their instructors, their faculty will all be people who are full-time um, professors who have completed a ton of research in the field. They are academics. They've been studying this stuff. So for the student, what that often means is looking at how they prefer to learn, what type of environment they're comfortable in, and of course, what type of career they would ultimately like to pursue as they move through life. This graphic is from the Ontario Ministry of Education, so it is very Ontario-centric. There are a few things I'd like to note, the reason I pulled it up. One, first off, is you'll see the dark pink arrows between the three different credential types, the apprenticeship, the certificate, diploma, and the bachelor's degree. That should indicate to you, if it doesn't, that you can mix and match all the different pathways. And that's something that is a very, very big myth still that remains in post-secondary education. Many people and many parents, I would say, are very used to the idea of you pick the thing right out of high school that you're going to do, and that's what you did. That's your thing. More and more institutions are working with each other to form collaborative processes, to sign articulation agreements, to honor each other's previous education. For students who are interested in pursuing more than one pathway, or they change their mind after they've completed one pathway, schools will often honor previous education, either through the admission process or through exemptions from taking particular courses within their new program of study. And in a lot of cases, they will do both. So that is something where whatever you pick out of high school, that's not the thing you're stuck with. You actually have a lot of options for going on to other things. Pardon me. One of the requirements you'll see, and the other big thing I want to point out here in the top section where it says secondary, it says high school diploma, OSSD is what it's called here in Ontario, GED, or B-age. The term B-age refers to mature student status, and it indicates that students have the option to pursue post-secondary studies without a high school diploma or GED. This does not preclude them from obtaining the prerequisite courses that they need for a program. So if they needed, say, a grade 12 biology credit, they still have to have the grade 12 biology credit, but that doesn't mean they need to have the full diploma. So if your concern for your child is that they're not performing as well in high school as you think they need to be in order to get into some program, or that they maybe they didn't complete high school and now they're 22 or 23 years old and you're fearing that it's too late. Not true at all. None of that is true. There are always ways to wiggle around the system, and a lot of schools are recognizing that the more broadly they open things up, the more of a diverse student population they will have, and the more they will have to offer to a wider group of people, which obviously for them is great because it means more people can pay tuition. So if you have concerns about your child's academic performance, it may not be the barrier that you think it is. I want to give you an example of how this might play out in real life. And this is an actual situation that happened when I was working in the admissions department at one of Ontario's community colleges. I was staffing the front desk one day, and a mother came in with her son, who I've since dubbed Gus, mainly because I don't remember his name, but really for privacy, I wouldn't probably use his real name anyway. Gus was in grade 12. He was about to start his final semester in high school, and he'd begun high school thinking he wanted to become a chef. So through grade 9, 10, 11, and the first half of grade 12, he had taken his credits accordingly. To become a chef, you do college or apprenticeship. So he had college level credits in high school. The problem presented here was that in the fall of his last year, he decided he wanted to be a phys ed teacher instead. I did a terrible job of explaining this the day we got there eventually, but I did a terrible job of explaining this. So I've created a graphic of what this looks like to give you a better idea of kind of the hurdles that Gus now had to jump in order to make this change. So in Ontario, in order to be a teacher, certainly in the public education system, and I would suspect at most private schools as well, you must be a member in good standing of the Ontario College of Teachers. In order to become a member in good standing of the Ontario College of Teachers, you must have a Bachelor of Education degree. That is a 2-year university program, by the way. In order to get into a Bachelor of Education degree program, you have to have completed an undergraduate degree, which for most universities is a 4-year degree program. And certainly if you're looking at anything graduate or professional level, you're usually going to have that honors year, that 4th year. Now, because Gus was particularly interested in phys ed, I suggested that kinesiology would be the appropriate area of study. Depending on what level you want to teach, you need either 1 or 2 teachables to get into the Bachelor's of Ed. So that's something to bear in mind too. Gus did confirm for me that day that he'd asked his own phys ed teacher, and that's what his phys ed teacher had studied as well in their undergrad. So the challenge here is Gus now has to get into a degree program, but he only has grade 12 credits that will get him into college or apprenticeship. He doesn't have anything to get him into university, and he doesn't have the credits from grade 11 to get him into the grade 12 courses that will get him those prerequisites. So short of repeating 2 years of high school, which can be a tricky thing to pull off, his guidance counselor had suggested, hey, why don't you go drop by the college? I think they have some options. So these are the options I presented to Gus that day. He could do continuing education through his school board. Essentially, that's night school, which we've all known about forever. He could do continuing education through the college, which would not be super dissimilar, but I will come back to the added twist in just a moment. He could complete a general arts and science certificate program, which is a 1-year college program, in which he would be able to pick up his prerequisites and the added bonus, and this goes along with the Con Ed college courses, he would get an extra boost when it came to admissions for university. So often in the admissions process, if an applicant has completed previous post-secondary credits, they will usually get credit for that. So they might get, I don't know, they might apply a weighting factor of 0.1% or 1% or something like that on their average, which overall boosts it higher. So in high school, if you got an 80, it's an 80. If you'd completed college courses and you got an 80, it might be an 83. The other option Gus had was to pursue a fitness and health promotion diploma program, which was a 2-year program. And we had an articulation agreement with a partner university that meant that Gus would be able to, once successfully completing the diploma, get into the 3rd year of the 4-year kinesiology degree program at that partner school. Every one of these options would get Gus where he wanted to go. The biggest difference in them really came down to amount of time and amount of money that he wanted to spend. And that was really it. But any one of them would get him exactly where he wanted to go. And without, this idea of he failed, he got it wrong. Yes, he had to jump the hurdles and he had to take a bit of an alternate path, but there are usually a lot of alternate paths. At the time, I was not working in career development. If I had been, I probably would have asked Gus a few more questions. And this is something I would suggest you do with your own kids. If they do have a particular idea of something they'd like to pursue, it's a very simple process to just say, what is it about that career that appeals to you the most? And if I had asked that question of Gus, I don't know what his answer would have been. Is it working with youth? Is it the recreation and fitness stuff? Is it the health and wellness stuff? Is it teaching and being able to mentor? Is it working in an environment where, employment's a little more guaranteed? I'm putting that in air quotes. There's the pension and the benefits, the summers off. What is it about the role that particularly sounds appealing? Because depending on Gus's answer, there is a host of other types of work that might really, really fit what he's looking at. And it might be something he could pursue right out of the gate without having to do this extra winding around and figuring out what additional credits he might need. So whatever the young adult in your life is considering, it might be helpful to ask that question. And it's not really about how the answer matches what you think is appropriate or even what the answer actually is. For example, when I work with clients who want to get into the medical field, they'll say, oh, I want to be a doctor. And I will say, what is it about being a doctor that appeals to you? And very, very often the answer I get is because I want to help people. And for me, I always push a little bit more into that and go, what does that mean to you? Because there are a million ways to help people, right? If I'm a single mom and I'm carting around 3 kids under the age of 6, the most helpful person I can find right now is someone who is a counter attendant at Starbucks or Tim Hortons and can hand me some caffeine, right? So being helpful is something that's very, very situation specific. And so you can dig into that a little bit more and really get them to say, okay, but what about helping people in that particular way is appealing? You might be surprised at how deep they get into it. It encourages them too to dig into, like, what are the stereotypes? What are their assumptions? And can they find ways of debunking some of that? This one is a little bit longer. There is a lot of meat that I could talk about this stuff for days, but there is a lot of meat into post-secondary pathways. As I said, I encourage you to go out and dig a little deeper and find out more that you can. For now, that brings us to the end of chapter 3 of the video series. I will see you in the next video where we will look at changes in the economy pre-COVID-19. You take good care.